This is for the people that are facing some things. This is for the people who know they were destined to be great. This is for the people that know they were destined to be successful. This is your season. This is your time. This is your hour. This is your minute. My brother and sister, this is your very second. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do with this opportunity? Because it takes faith to succeed. It takes faith to achieve. It takes faith. It takes faith. Nowadays it's hard to get what you want to achieve. But the way the world is set, well, was everybody Sunday good? I get sleepy, honey, when y'all get quiet. I get scared. I didn't know what was going on for a minute. Was everybody Sunday good? Did you go to church? Did you go to the park? Did you eat good? I went to Camino Bakery with my daughter and son and ate cookies and drunk coffee as much as I could. Went to church, and now I'm here. How everybody else doing? Come on here now.
My Sunday was good. I've been, prepping for this. I had a meeting this morning, so busy day for me.
Okay. Yes, I'm excited. What about you, Jada? Come on here now. I'm gonna just start calling names. Jada.
I had a busy morning. I had one of my friends from like high school come down. We spent like the week together, and she had to go back to Raleigh, so I had to drive her there and then come back. So
okay,
my morning started really early, but we're here.
You sound like you from the DMV. You from the DMV?
I am from DC. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I heard it. I heard she said my friend. I heard you said I took her down to Raleigh. Like y'all say a certain way. Like okay. I love the DMV. That's really where I was supposed to been born and raised, but God had otherwise. Okay.
We still adopt you. We got you.
Okay, I love that. But I love Winston-Salem too much. I don't know, Jada. We may have y'all beat in a couple more years. You give us time, we're gonna be another DMV. What's up, Nick? Nicholas.
How's it going? I didn't do too much today. I've kind of just had a relaxing morning.
Okay.
It's been a long week, so I needed it.
Sunday fun day, rest day, however you want to do it. Cedric, I talked to you last time, I think before, right? Me and you and Katie. Okay, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man. Much like Nick, kind of been relaxing. Just was really chilling this morning. Watched a little bit of the Hawks game, so they gonna do. So
you a Hawks fan, bro?
So not really. Like I pull for them because I'm from Georgia, but I'm a Heat fan, and we fishing. So I'm like,
you probably was a Miami Heat fan because of LeBron, but you didn't want to switch up and seem like a bandwagon. Is that what it was? Oh, okay.
It's because of D Wade. D Wade.
He do it all the time. So I mean,
yeah, no. D Wade's my favorite player, and so like I've been loving him since like 06. So
that's what's up. That's what's up.
All right. And then are we just waiting on Nicole and then a few more people to trickle in?
Yes.
Sweet. All right. Ethan, can you let me know when she shows up so that way we can get started when a few more people get here?
Yes, I'll chat you in the chat.
Great. Thank you.
My sister Q says she had virtual church and NAACP duties. I already know, always working, never stop working. I love that. My sister always working. Ariana, I don't know if I'm saying it wrong, Miss Dobson, but I just so I call you Miss Dobson, just for short.
Yeah, that's how you pronounce it, Ariana.
Awesome.
I'm doing good. I just got home from 2 church services, and they were outside. They were outside, so you already know how I'm feeling. I'm in the AC now. I'm ready to go.
You didn't know if it was the Holy Ghost or the heat, did you? No, I'm playing.
It was the heat today.
It was the heat.
It was the heat today.
Ooh, I'm screaming. Yeah. That's what's up, though. That's what's up. Tevin, Mr. Tevin. I think that's my brother, Tevin.
I don't know where you at right now, but we just wanted to hear your voice. How you doing, King? Yeah, everybody. We got one of my mentors, one of my favorite people, one of the people that continues to install some great wisdom in me, and we have a great relationship. Sheriff Kimbrough is on officially. He is on, and I just wanted to acknowledge him and tell him thank you, for joining us.
Thank you, my brother, for inviting me, man. It's always a pleasure to be where you at. I learn a lot when I'm in the presence of you.
Yes, sir. Thank God for him. Thank you. Thank you. Nicole said give her 2 more minutes. She'll be here as well.
No problem. Also, Sheriff Kimbrough, I just want to say thank you as well. We really appreciate you being here and being willing to come on today. So I just wanted to say my personal thanks from all of us today as well. We are so excited and we're so thankful for your presence.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Hi there, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us. I think you're muted.
No problem. Sorry, I'm running a few minutes behind.
No, you were perfectly fine. Thank you so much for being here with us today. So Ethan, if you think we're at an okay point, do you want us to go ahead and get started? Just kind of go over a little bit of the basics.
Absolutely.
All right.
Everything's in your hands now.
Great, thank you. All right, so just a reminder, as everybody starts to trickle in, I just wanted to say your cameras should be off and you should be muted as you enter, but unless you're one of the presenters, that we ask that you keep them off during the duration of the presentation, just to make it a little bit easier and to prevent any technical difficulties, as we know are bound to happen on Zoom, so we're trying to do our best to prevent whatever we can. Also, throughout the duration of the presentation, please ask any questions that you may have in the chat box. We have people monitoring it, and that's just to help our presenters during their presentations to make sure that they're not distracted by anything, and that we can make sure at the end of the presentation that all of our questions are directed, so we have a nice smooth flow going all the way through. All right, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started with a few introductions. All right, so as you all know, we're here today for the Know Your Rights event, and we have a few different organizations with us today that we'll go into a little bit more detail now. So to start out, we have Frankie Gist with Hope Dealers Outreach. And Frankie, I'm going to ask you to just quickly kind of introduce yourself, who you are, a little bit about your organization, and your part to play here today. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Frankie Gist, founder of Hope Dealers Outreach. A little bit about me, born and raised here in Winston-Salem. I love making a difference. Hope Dealers was birthed. I'm gonna give you a short summary because I can talk. So Hope Dealers was birthed in me in 2012, but it actually didn't. I didn't actually really start moving until 2015. And we are about bridging the gap in the community. We're about love, peace, and unity. I say that everywhere we go, love, peace, and unity, and bridging the gap and bringing people together of all races. We don't tackle one problem, but we tackle every problem, because one problem only births another problem. So we try our best to tackle every problem that we can. So and today we wanted to bring this platform here to not only bring us together, but it's time for us to really have real conversation. And in order to you to have real conversation, you must know your rights. You must know certain things to be able to talk about certain stuff. So I'm thankful for Wake Forest Law, Katie and Cedric, everyone that's a part of this movement. And I always say before we get off here, love isn't love until you give it away. Thank you all.
Thank you, Frankie. We appreciate that. And we're so thankful to have you working with us and help to make this event happen. We couldn't have done it without your help. All right. And then next we have some of our folks from Wake Forest Law, so myself included. But I'm going to go ahead and start with Cedric James with the Know Your Rights Pro Bono Project. And I'm going to have Cedric quickly introduce himself and tell us a little bit about the Pro Bono Project and kind of what he's going to be talking about today.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. My name is Cedric James. I'm I guess now 3L at Wake Forest Law. I'm one of the co-coordinators for the Know Your Rights Pro Bono Project. And the purpose of the project is we go to different areas within the community. Before COVID, we normally went to a lot of schools around Winston-Salem. After COVID, thanks to Zoom, we've kind of had the opportunity to branch out to different areas, both in North Carolina as well as out of the state. And we just focus on letting people know the main rights that they have when it comes to interactions with law enforcement, and kind of giving them that information so that they're equipped with some of the tools that they can have in their tool belt when they interact with law enforcement, to make sure that these interactions not only go over as well as possible, but to make sure that their rights aren't violated. And if they are, then they're able to let their attorney or whoever know and kind of seek proper justification for that.
Great, thank you, Cedric. We're happy to have you here today, and thank you for working with me on this. All right, then next we have Nick Acevedo, and he's actually with our Firearms Awareness Club and with the Society for Criminal Justice Reform. So we're so thankful to have him here today. And Nick, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and a little bit about the organizations you're a part of?
Yeah, sure. So I'm also a 3L at Wake Forest University School of Law. I'm a part of the Firearms Awareness Club as well as the Society for Criminal Justice Reform. But today I'm really wearing the hat of the Firearms Awareness Club, which is a group that we're trying to just stimulate conversation about firearms, raise awareness about proper firearm safety techniques, and really just try and have a safe space for that discussion about either, pro-gun regulation or anti-gun regulation, really a place to just have good conversation about it in a respectful way and to teach people how firearms work. Thanks. I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you so much, Nick. Next, we have Jada Saxon with the Society for Criminal Justice Reform. If you just want to introduce yourself, Jada, your position within the Society for Criminal Justice Reform, and then kind of what you're going to be talking about today.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jada Saxon. I'm currently the Vice President of the Society for Criminal Justice Reform. I'm going to be tackling similar to what Nick is doing, just kind of like the gun laws, but specific to North Carolina, so you have a better idea of that. The Society of Criminal Justice Reform, Katie, I don't know if you want to tackle this one, but it's an organization that myself, Katie, and a few other students started to just kind of tackle the issue of some laws that kind of tend to negatively impact or disproportionately impact certain members of the community, and just kind of tackling things that we see that should change because of that disproportionate impact. So thank you. Glad to be here with you all.
Great, thank you so much, Jada. And my name is Katie Merlin. I've been working with Frankie and everybody here to make this to help make this event happen today. I'm the social events and outreach coordinator for the Society for Criminal Justice Reform, and I am a 3L at Wake Forest University Law School. And mostly my role here today is just to facilitate that conversation and to help get everybody here together. And just to kind of briefly give a little bit more information about the Society for Criminal Justice Reform, while we're in the law school, we do want to be able to have an impact in the community. So we are always looking for opportunities to speak to you all about your rights and organize different events. So if at any point any of you have any ideas as to how we can better serve the Winston-Salem community, we are always looking for new opportunities. And I thank you all for the opportunity to be here. And thank you all for listening to us and being interested in this event. We are always so happy to be able to do anything we can for the community, and thankful for all of our presenters today, and for Frankie and Ethan and everybody who's here. I appreciate you all to no end. Thank you so much. And next we have our special guests, Nicole Little and Bobby Kimbrough. If we could start with Nicole Little, if you would like to give a brief introduction for yourself. And I just want to say a special thank you to you both for being here and for being willing to answer questions for our guests. I'm very, very thankful for your input and for your service today.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole Little. I'm a native to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I like to call myself a native hometown girl. Essentially, I actually went to Wake Forest for undergrad, graduated from there in 2013, went on to law school, graduated from North Carolina Central School of Law up in Durham in 2017. And since being back here in Winston, my practice has predominantly been around criminal defense, post-conviction relief, and really taking a look at what Katie and Jada are actually looking at as well as criminal justice reform. I'm currently an associate attorney at Grace Tisdale and Clifton here in Forsyth County, and handling misdemeanor, criminal misdemeanor, felony matters in both Forsyth and oftentimes Guilford counties as well. I've been practicing for almost 4 years now, and what you'll learn once you guys get in the practice of law is that every day feels like a year. So with that being said, I feel like I've gained a lot of experience, and I'm surely happy to be here today to talk to you all, well, at least answer any questions and provide any clarification you may have in regards to the presenter. So thank you for having me today as a special guest.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you so much and are so thankful for your input and for everything you're doing today. And then Sheriff Kimbrough, would you like to also give us a little quick introduction?
Sure, I'm Bobby Kimbrough. I'm a native of Forsyth County as well as Nicole. I started my career here a long time ago before a lot of you all were born. I spent 6 years with the Winston-Salem Police Department from 84 to 90. Spent the next several years as a special agent with the U.S. Department of Justice. I'm a graduate of High Point University. Have my master's degree from Carolina University. I'm finishing up a doctoral degree. I just love being a part of this community, love trying to change the narrative and the atmosphere.
Well, thank you so much, Sheriff Kimbrough. We are so thankful to have you here and to answer our guest questions. And we just appreciate your presence and for taking your time out today to be here. All right, and now let's go ahead and get started. So first, we're going to start with Cedric James with the Know Your Rights presentation. Cedric, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. So yeah, this is going to be the Know Your Rights portion, and we're just going to go over a couple of key rights that you have when it comes to interacting with law enforcement, and whether it be on the state or local or federal level. So the first right that we're going to talk about three here today. The first one that we're going to cover is going to be the Fifth Amendment right, and that's the right to remain silent. And so all of these rights are granted to you by the Constitution. And so according to the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, every person has the right not to answer questions that are asked of them by a government official or a police officer. So a lot of you may remember people saying, like, I plead the Fifth. This is the right to remain silent, or the right against self-incrimination. The next one that we have is going to be the Fourth Amendment. And so this is protection from any unreasonable searches or seizures. And so the Fourth Amendment generally is a protection of your privacy. And so without a warrant, police, under most circumstances, without a warrant, police may not search your home or office without your consent. And due to this, the Fourth Amendment right gives you the right to refuse to let them search, whether it be your home, your office, your car. There are some exceptions, but for the main portion, the Fourth Amendment is that right to your protection of privacy in you and your items, so to speak. And then lastly, the one that we're going to be discussing today is going to be your First Amendment right. So right here, we have it titled the right to advocate for change. And so in general, the First Amendment, and the way we're going to be talking about it, is in regard to your free speech. And so the First Amendment protects the rights of groups and individuals who want to advocate for change. Commonly, if you think about it, this is like the right to protest, the right to, participate in peaceful demonstration, things of those nature. All of that falls under your First Amendment right. So when we're going to be talking today about interactions with law enforcement, there are three different so-called phases. And the first that we're going to talk about is the conversation phase. And so the easiest way to think about it is it's very similar to what we're doing now, how I'm having a conversation with you. And so just how if I were to walk up to you on the street or in the grocery store and try to interact in a conversation, the same way you don't have to talk to me, when you're in that conversation phase with law enforcement officers, you don't have to talk to them either. And so best practice there is just, politely but firmly refuse to speak to them. And always make it clear that you're refusing to engage in this conversation. And if it's simply a conversation, if that's all that the police are having with you, you have the right to refuse that conversation and essentially the right to walk away from the conversation, the same as if you were talking to any person in public. And so if you're ever stopped by the police, it's the first question you always want to ask is if you're free to leave. If they say yes, you are free to leave, then leave. You're not required to provide your ID unless they are detaining you. And in some circumstances, of course, if you're driving a car, then you have to provide, a driver's license showing that you are allowed by the state to operate a motor vehicle. But other than that, if they say you're free to leave and you would like to leave, then you can leave. Always in these instances, you want to stay calm. You want to stay in control of your words and actions because you don't want to escalate the situation, especially in a situation where you may not be exactly sure what's going on. The police, you may see it as them coming to talk to you. They may have another idea in mind of they're coming to talk to you for a specific reason. So it's always best to, stay calm and kind of keep it at a cool situation. And you never want to run or physically resist, especially if they tell you you're not free to leave. But most important takeaway from this is if you ask, am I free to leave? And they say yes, and you would like to leave, at that point, leave. And so the second phase is the detention phase. And so this is a higher level than conversation, but you haven't yet reached arrest. And so a police officer, they may only detain you if they believe that you are involved in a crime. And so it takes into account what's called reasonable suspicion. There are different ways that police officers can obtain that reasonable suspicion. But off of that last slide, if you were to ask, am I free to leave? In the detention phase, they'll tell you, no, you're not. And they'll tell you that they're detaining you. In that instance, you want to ask them why they're detaining you, because they have to tell you the reason that they're detaining you. And so if they tell you that you're not free to leave and you're being detained at that moment, you don't want to try to leave, but you do want to find out why they are detaining you. And so if you are being detained and you're told, no, you are not free to go, typically the things you're going to need to provide some identifying information about yourself to the officer. So you're going to need to provide, usually it's your name, address, and date of birth if you're being detained. And what's important about this is it's actually a crime to give a false name to a police officer, even if you're doing it in a sarcastic manner, or maybe some people, they'll go by a nickname and they're used to being called by their nickname. So I know, for example, let's say I have a friend from back home. Everybody calls him Bobby. His name is Robert Reeves, but everybody calls him Bobby Reeves. So if you're talking to an officer, you're going to want to give them your actual government name. So in that instance, he would want to tell them his name is Robert Reeves and not Bobby Reeves, because he could be charged with giving a false name. Also, as you're required to give police officers information, they're required to give you some information. So you can ask them for their name, their agency, and their badge number. If you're able to write it down, that's something you might want to write down and keep on you. Or if it's a situation where, you haven't been placed in handcuffs or anything, and they say, hey, ask, can I put it in a phone? Or maybe if there's somebody there with you, that's information you want to keep down for later, just in case. Be aware that if you are detained, for their own safeties, officers typically are going to pat you down. And so when they are patting you down, anything within your reach or your wingspan, so to speak, can also be searched if they reasonably suspect that it could cause any serious injury to them or their partners. So if you're in a car and they search you, they also have the right to search your car with inside that car. But just know that if you are being detained, you do need to provide certain information. You need to provide that information truthfully, and you are also allowed to ask police officers for their information, which typically, most importantly, is going to be name, agency, badge number, maybe, you know, a patrol car number, but you want to get some type of information just in case an issue arises later, you know who to go back and kind of talk with. Now, one important thing to know is that police officers, they don't have to tell you the truth. And most officers nowadays, they will tell you the truth, but just be aware that they don't have to tell you the truth. So they are allowed to lie to you or give you some form of misinformation. So that's something that you need to be aware of. And this is kind of going to roll into one of the next rights that we talked about, but just being aware that police officers, they are not required by law to tell you the truth about anything they're investigating. And so they can promise you that, you know, oh, situation will be easier if you cooperate, or, you know, if you tell us what we want, you can go home. Like you see that a lot of times in movies on TV. But just be aware that while they can make these promises to you, sometimes they are telling you the truth and they really will try and help you out. But sometimes they're also just telling you that, and they're actually not going to be able to fulfill those promises. So just know that police officers do not have to tell you the truth. And that's why it's so important to assert your right to remain silent. A lot of people equate that right to remain silent, where if somebody's asking me questions, if I'm remaining silent, oh, that must mean I'm guilty. That's not the case at all. It's important to assert your right to remain silent because it is your right. And you have some instances where most officers are honest, and if they tell you, I'll try to help you out, they truly will. But there will be some cases where since police are allowed to lie to you at times, it can kind of put you in a bad situation. So that's where it's very important to assert that right to remain silent. And so moving into the third and kind of final phase of police interactions, you have the arrest phase. And so the police, for most instances, they cannot physically move you unless you are under arrest. And so if you're being told, you know, let's say you were detained and now it's moved from you being detained to the officer saying, okay, I'm going to place you under arrest. If you are arrested, you immediately want to invoke that Fifth Amendment right. You want to remain silent, but you also want to ask for a lawyer. And so understanding that, and we'll get into this later on when we talk about Miranda rights, but understanding that if you can't afford a lawyer, the government will provide one for you. If you do have a lawyer that you have on speed dial or what's called retainer, if that's the case, then you want to contact that lawyer immediately and you want to let the police know, hey, I don't want to talk to you until my lawyer is present. You have the right to do that. If you are injured, you should seek medical attention. Typically, most common police practices are if you are injured, they will provide medical attention for you. So normally they'll call EMS. If EMS says, hey, he needs to go to the hospital, they'll transport you to the hospital. And then once you're cleared, they'll then transport you to whatever facility they're going to take you to, whether it be like county lockup or downtown, police station detention center. But it's important to know that if you are injured, you need to seek medical attention. For youth under the age of 18, there are the same rights as adults, but normally anything that is taken from a teenager or a youth, and once a youth is actually detained, they're normally only released to a parent or a guardian. So that's where it differs from adults, because adults, once you're released, you can go on your own. If it's a youth, once you're released, you're going to have to be released to a parent or a guardian of some nature. And much like in detention, when you're arrested, police, again, will search you. And so when police are making an arrest, they are allowed to search you. Again, this is for their safety. And so they may search anything within your reaching or lunging space or wingspan. And for the most part, there are some exceptions, but police do need a warrant to search like the trunk of your car. So if you're in your car and you're arrested, police, and you will probably see like police searching through the inside of your car, they're allowed to do that because by definition, that's within your wingspan. You could have hit something within your car. As far as the trunk of your car, they'll normally need a warrant to search that area, but there are some exceptions there. And typically the most common practice nowadays is that if an officer is going to do like a pat down or body search of you, it must be done by an officer of the same gender. So you'll have a male officer patting down male suspect, female officer patting down female suspect. And that's typically how that goes. And so reasons why you can be arrested. Typically the police, they may arrest you if they personally witness you breaking the law, if they have probable cause to believe you have committed a crime, or if they have a warrant for your arrest. And they can also arrest you if you commit an act of nonviolent civil disobedience. And so the easiest way to kind of break that term down is if you think about a lot of like protests, sometimes you'll have the peaceful protests in one area, and then maybe let's say somebody vandalizes something in another area, the police see you vandalize something, that's considered nonviolent civil disobedience because you didn't actually hurt a person, but you were committing an act of nonviolent civil disobedience. So these are just some instances where the police may arrest you if they see, or if any of these categories come into play. Now, the most important thing for you to do is to assert your rights. The common issue that is encountered is, one, people don't know their rights, which is why we do this presentation. But it's even more important that when you do know your rights, you assert your rights, because if you don't actively assert those rights, then you can't use them. They don't automatically come into play. You have to let them know, like, hey, this is what I want to do. And so that's why it's important to, verbally say, hey, I'm going to remain silent and I want to contact my attorney. And it's important that you say that, because once you say these words, police are then legally required to stop questioning you. And it's important that when you assert your rights, you do it clearly. There's a case where a person told the police I think I want my attorney dog. And when it went to the Court of Appeals, the question was, is him saying he wants his attorney dog, is that him actually saying I want an attorney, or is it saying that you want an attorney dog? So it's very important for you to assert your rights clearly. And if you want to remain silent, clearly say, hey, I'm invoking my right to remain silent. I want to contact an attorney. I don't want to talk to you until an attorney is contacted. Because if you don't clearly assert it, if you have an issue where it comes up later on in, the court proceedings, then it becomes a bit of a gray area, and it's kind of hard to prove what you intended and what the police should have understood from what you said. So you want to clearly assert your rights. Again, if you don't have an attorney, the police will provide you with a phone book of sorts, depending on where you are. Some rural counties get an actual phone book. Some of the larger counties, they'll have a sheet, so it won't be an actual phone book. But if you can't have an attorney, the police or the government will provide you with one, or a way to contact one. And so it's just very important, again, to verbally assert your rights clearly. And so these are the famous Miranda rights. I'm pretty sure all of us that have seen any type of show that involves somebody getting arrested, you've heard them. And so these rights are, you have the right to remain silent and to refuse to answer any questions. And these aren't like verbatim how they'll be read to you, but you have the right to remain silent and to refuse to answer any questions. Anything that you do, say, can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be given to you at no charge. And then after they tell you this, they'll ask, do you understand the rights that have been explained to you? You'll then say yes or no. If you say no, then of course they can't say you understood your Miranda rights unless you actually understand them. So if you say, yes, I did understand, then the next question that's going to follow is, knowing and understanding your rights as I have explained them to you, are you willing to answer my questions without an attorney present? So understand that you can understand your Miranda rights. You can know you haven't done anything wrong. And once they ask this final question, knowing and understanding your rights as I have explained them to you, are you willing to answer my questions without an attorney present? You can tell them, I understand everything you told me. I get it, but I don't want to talk to you without my attorney. And that is perfectly fine. That is within your constitutional rights. And that is highly suggested that you do that just to decrease any chance of any errors occurring along the way. And so we have developed kind of what we call the Miranda rights remix. And so this is you demanding your rights. And so this is, instead of them asking you, do you understand these rights? This is kind of you showing that you know your rights. And so you then say, you know, I will not talk to you about anything. I demand to have my attorney present before I speak to you or anyone. I will not answer any questions without my attorney present. I do not agree to perform any tests or to be searched. Of course, there's an exception to this sometimes where if it's like a DUI, normally they have to perform DUI like field sobriety tests to see whether or not you should be charged with the DUI. So in those instances, that may differ a little bit because those don't involve actual words. It's like normally it's you know, walking a line, follow my finger. It's things of that nature. So that differs a little bit, but for the most part, just, you know, stating I do not agree to perform any tests or to be searched. I will not sign anything unless my attorney says so. This goes towards typically whether there's like some type of statement that's been written up saying, hey, this is what happened. You do want to sign what's called your jail release agreement. And so if you're arrested, the jail release agreement is just saying when you came into the jail, this is everything that was taken off of your person. You're signing, acknowledging that everything was there. And then also you signing that says, okay, once you're released, all of this should be returned to you. So the jail release agreement, you will want to sign that. And then finally, you say, you know, I will not waive any of my constitutional rights. And again, don't think that making that statement makes you guilty. Even if you know you haven't done anything, it doesn't make you guilty. It's you asserting the rights that you have that are given to you by the Constitution. So just basic recap. So the 3 phases of police interaction, you have the conversation phase. There's no legal obligation to talk. You're free to leave. It's literally no different than you talking to a random person in the grocery store. Detention phase, you then at this phase have to provide some identifying information about yourself, but you aren't under arrest at this point, but you are not also free to leave. And then the arrest phase, this is where you have been arrested. You've been, you know, placed in handcuffs and either been transported down to the jail or about to be transported down there. This is where you definitely want to assert your right to remain silent and you want to ask for your attorney to be present. Just an important thing to know about warrants. Warrants have to be signed by a judge. It has to have a date and time, and they have to be specific about what areas are to be searched or what exactly is to be seized. And so also, if you ask to see the warrant, police have to show you the warrant. So when you get the warrant, it's important for you to like read over it and see exactly what they're supposed to be looking for. Because if the warrant says, okay, yes, you have probable cause to search the house, and let's say you have a shed that is, you know, 300 yards away from your house, that warrant doesn't extend to that shed. And so in that instance, the only way police can then search that shed is if you give them basically your permission. So it's important to know what that warrant is and what's the scope of that warrant. And yes, like Nicole said, also a judge or a magistrate judge has to sign that warrant. Your right to remain silent, you want to assert that immediately. Even if you haven't done anything, assert it immediately. And you want to, as I say, you want to stand on that right, because you can walk yourself out of that right if you say, hey, I want to remain silent, and then you start talking to them about something else. So once you say, I want to remain silent, it's just best to remain silent on everything. Don't even engage in any small talk or anything of that nature, because it can be seen as you saying, oh, okay, you want to remain silent, but then you started talking again. And as far as attorneys go, you want to contact your attorney immediately, or if you aren't able to contact your attorney immediately, you want to immediately make it be known that you want an attorney so you can try to contact them. And it's important to tell your attorney when you're able to get in contact with them what that reasonable suspicion was that police told you they were detaining you for or arresting you for. You want to make it known whether or not you were given those Miranda rights, and then that any identifying information about like the police officer or the agency or whoever you may have come in contact with, if your attorney needs to talk with them. So that concludes this section of the presentation, but these are some free legal sources that you have here in North Carolina. This is not an exhaustive list by any means. But you do have the ACLU of North Carolina, Church World Services, who helps out with a lot of immigration cases. There's the North Carolina Justice Center, of course, Legal Aid of North Carolina, the Civil Liberties and Defense Center, and then Youth Justice North Carolina. These are just some free legal services that can help you if you are in a position where you need that legal assistance and you aren't able to afford it yourself. They can help put you in contact with people who can help you.
Great. Thank you so much, Cedric, for all that. That was wonderful information. Before we move on to next portion of the presentation, Sheriff Kimbrough or Nicole Little, do you have anything that you would like to add or any comments to add to that conversation?
Sure, I can add a couple things. Cedric, you did a great job. Great job in covering most of these things. And I mean, I would just say from a very practical perspective, having, practiced criminal defense, what you find is that we learn a lot about our different constitutional rights, and you most certainly need to know them. You need to know when they are applicable to you in your circumstances and when to assert them. But what you find is that the encounters you may have with law enforcement ends up being a little bit more free flowing. So one of the biggest things, and I think it's more important for me at times to do like a myth buster. And one thing, a common question I get across the board when I'm talking to clients is, well, they'll say, well, he didn't read me my Miranda rights, and is that wrong? I think that should get my case thrown out. And sorry to say is that it depends, right? Everything depends often in the practice of law, and there's normally some type of legal test that we have to apply. But generally speaking, you're not, unless the officer intends on, one, placing you under custodial interrogation and then asking you questions that are going to elicit incriminating responses, they may not ever read you your rights. And what happens is most of the time they've collected as much evidence that they need prior to getting probable cause to arrest you that they don't have any more questions for you. And or they never had questions for you, or you just voluntarily engaged in conversation, or you voluntarily engaged in field sobriety tests or whatever it may be that led them to, they have probable cause without asking you questions. So that's one thing to recognize, is that oftentimes in Law and Order episodes, we'll see everybody gets read their Miranda rights as soon as the cuffs get slapped on. However, what you'll find is that unless the officer intends on asking you questions that will incriminate you once you have been arrested or been placed in custodial interrogation, then that is when they have to do it. But just because they don't do it doesn't necessarily mean that that is fatal to your case. But keep in mind, like Cedric said, understand engaging in voluntary consensual encounters and giving information when you are not being detained, they can use that. They can still use it against you. So yes, the question is, hey officer, am I free to leave? And if it is no, then they are, at that time that they're engaging in some investigation or they have some suspicion of a criminal activity, and you need to be on your feet. But if the answer is yes, then you know that you have free to leave. You're free to leave, and the encounter was in fact consensual. The other piece was about law enforcement when you're talking to them and their ability to lie. Cedric is correct. There is Supreme Court cases. I wrote a couple down here, but Frazier v. Cupp from 1969 that has made the ability to be deceptive. I think the better word is deceptive as opposed to lying, but deceptive, it is permissible from law enforcement. The nature of their job is that they know that people are not just going to come in readily and admit to a crime, even if they did do it. So in that case, they're able to use a certain amount of deception in their interrogation practices to effectuate their job. And, it goes both ways. If that is leading to somebody admitting to a crime that they did do, it's different. But oftentimes, or not oftentimes, but other times we see people kind of getting placed in weird positions and they may admit to something that they did not do. So that's where the balancing test comes into play. But they are not allowed to fabricate evidence, or they are not allowed to lie about the law to you. And that's where the breaking point becomes. I think that in many of my cases, I'm thankful that I feel as if law enforcement have done a great job in not manufacturing or fabricating evidence. While I may see deceptive practices, I don't see anything that crosses the line. And I'm thankful for that, but I know that it has happened in other jurisdictions across the country, just based on history. So with that being said, that was one thing I wanted to point out. While they're able to use some form of deception, they are not able to manufacture, fabricate evidence, or lie to you. And again, that is me using my own bright line test, but you would also have to look at your specific case specifically and apply the case law as you see fit. I would also like to give a shout out really quickly to Sheriff Kimbrough, and I say that because there were a couple things that Cedric mentioned that while it's not statutory authority that officers have to provide you their name, their badge number, and their agency. It's not statutory authority, but when you have certain policies instituted in place by your department leaders, then they begin to create a culture where their law enforcement and their officers below them begin to act this particular way. It's been many instances where I've had cases and, I would hear Sheriff Kimbrough, don't, quote me on this, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but Sheriff Kimbrough has a no tongue lashing policy. You tell people what you tell them, but you don't have to go into the extra, who-was and down the road and talking junk to them. I mean, it's just do your job. That's what we're all here for, is to do our job. But I think that goes more so to policy within your department. And I think that's where law enforcement and change agents can do a great job with establishing a culture in their departments. But that was one thing that officers, and also making sure that when somebody's doing a search, that it's a male on male and female on female, with there's still no law. Now that's a factor I may use to say that something, was against somebody's Fourth Amendment right, but it's not a law that says they have to do it. And so with that being said, of course, we want to encourage and continue to lift our law enforcement leaders, because when they implement policies like that, we certainly see changes within our culture, and hopefully we can see it as on a more vibrant basis. So those are the only things I want to add. Hopefully I didn't take too much time.
Thank you so much, Nicole Little. That was wonderful. And we thank you so much for that information. I'm sure that'll be really helpful for a lot of people. Sheriff Kimbrough, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I just wanted to say that says you did an awesome job of going through that. And Nicole, I appreciate you for some of those, as you were talking about, it's not law, just myth. And she said something that was so, I think, so poignant that is relevant, is that it is a free-flowing conversation. It's not a checker game where you move, then I wait for you to move. It's flowing smoothly. And sometimes that flowing smoothly, as she said, the officer may have enough information without even reading your rights and say, hey, I'm placing you on arrest just based on a free-flowing conversation. So my advice is, if I was going to give advice to my sons, one of my boys, I wouldn't even engage in a free-flowing conversation, because a free-flowing conversation, you have no idea what he or she is trying to obtain or what they're asking you for. And so that would be my advice, because once you engage in that free-flowing conversation, many times you giving up free-flowing information and you have no idea. And one of the things that I urge my sons and anybody I come in contact with, right? If you're not a lawyer, don't practice law on the side of the road. Don't practice law without a law degree. Don't do that. That is a mistake that so many people practice that ends up going sideways for them. My sons, I have 7 boys, you've heard me talk about it. None of them have a law degree. And I tell them all the time, I have one that's in law enforcement, but what I tell them is that you're not a lawyer. If you're not a lawyer, don't practice law. Because what happens is you stand on the side of the road and you're talking with a seasoned veteran law enforcement who has so many skill sets that you'll find up in that free-flowing conversation, and you find up being arrested. So if you encounter law enforcement, period, I'm not going to even engage you in a free-flowing conversation. I need to see Grace, Tisdale, and Little, and take it from there. But that was all I had to say. But thank you, Nicole, for cleaning up some of those myths. And says you did a wonderful job on your presentation.
Thank you so much to both of you for your comments. And so now we can go ahead with Nick's portion of the presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nick, and I'm excited to give you this presentation on firearm safety. We're going to be hitting on firearm safety in general, proper firearm storage, and police interactions if you're in possession of a firearm. Next slide. Just a little bit of background on me so you know where I'm coming from. I spent 5 years enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, and that was my first exposure to firearms. So a lot of what you're going to see today about firearm safety is coming from the rules and methods that were instilled in me by the Marine Corps. And I think it's safe to say that there's no better gun club in the world. So you know you're getting the right training here. Since my time in the Marine Corps, I've continued to own and possess my own personal firearms. And now I am the Firearms Awareness Club president at Wake Forest University School of Law. Next slide. So these 4 rules are the firearm safety rules, should be at the front of your mind whenever you're handling a firearm. If you practice these 4 rules at all times while handling a firearm, there's no reason to ever have a negligent discharge. So rule number 1 is to treat every weapon as if it were loaded. Even if you know that your firearm is not loaded, you need to respect it as though it is. And then rule number 2, never point a weapon at anything you do not intend to shoot. So this goes to when you're carrying your firearm around, it should either be holstered or pointed down at the ground. You should never be pointing your gun upward, flagging any people. Always remember, treat it as if it's loaded. Do not point it at something unless you are intending to shoot it. And then 3 and 4 kind of go together. You want to keep your finger straight and off the trigger until you're ready to fire, which you can see in this picture. And keep the weapon on safe until you intend to fire. This means that if for some reason something was to pull on your trigger, it would not fire because the safety is on. And you should not be pulling the trigger on accident because your finger is straight and off the trigger. When you intend to fire and you aim at your target, it's at that point that you're going to move your finger down to the trigger and turn the safety off. If you follow these 4 rules, you should never have a negligent discharge. All right, next slide. And it's also important to always be aware of the condition of your weapon. There are 4 different conditions, but we're going to hit on condition 0, 2, 3, and 4 because they're the most important and most common. Condition 0 is a fire-ready weapon. This is when you have a magazine inserted into the gun, there is a round in the chamber, and the safety is off. As I said in the last slide, you should not be at this point until you intend to fire, because all that is left is for you to pull the trigger and the gun will fire. So this is not a condition that you want to be in when the gun is stored, when the gun is holstered. This is that last condition before you're ready to fire. Condition 2, 3, and 4 are different storage method conditions. At condition 2, you have a magazine inserted, there's a round in the chamber, and the safety is on. So at this point, all that's required is for you to turn off that safety and pull the trigger before the firearm will fire, which is a more dangerous, condition of the weapon because there are less steps needed before it's ready to fire. Condition 3, there's no round in the chamber. So this is going to be a preferred method of storage, but it will take that additional step of you pulling back the slide, or if it's a rifle, pulling back the charging handle to chamber that round before the firearm is ready to fire. So it's one more step before it's ready to fire, which makes it one step closer to being a safe weapon for storage. And then condition 4 is the safest method of storage. This is where there's no magazine inserted and no round in the chamber. However, this will require the most steps before that firearm is operable and ready to be used. Next slide. So firearm storage, our goal here is to keep the firearm away from a person who cannot legally or responsibly be in possession. And if nothing else, you want to render the firearm inoperable. Now, there are a couple considerations that you need to keep in mind for where and how you're going to store your firearm. One is quick access, because although we want our firearm to be in a safe place, we also want to have quick access to that firearm if there's ever an emergency situation. So this is going to play a role in choosing what storage method you're going to use, and I'll be going over more of those later. Also, centralized location. Where in your home are you going to keep that firearm stored? Because same as before, you want to have a quick access if there's ever an emergency situation. You should always be aware of the condition of your firearm when it's in storage, so you know if you grab it, do you still have to insert a magazine? Do you have to chamber a round? You should be aware of the condition of your firearm at all times. And it's a good idea also to have essential equipment stored with your firearm. So this means additional magazines, I would recommend a light in case there's ever, you know, a situation where you need to pull your firearm at night. You have a flashlight so you can be aware of what you are targeting in your home. And then I also recommend having medical stuff nearby, just in case there ever is a situation where that firearm is used, you're also ready to render first aid. Next slide. In addition to these personal reasons for wanting to properly store your gun to ensure that everyone is safe, there's also a legal need to have proper storage of your firearm. Under this North Carolina general statute, it's a class 1 misdemeanor if a minor gains possession of your firearm and either brings it to a place where a firearm is illegal, exhibits it in a public place in a careless, angry, or threatening manner, causes personal injury or death with the firearm, or uses the firearm in the commission of a crime. So if you have a minor in your home and you leave the firearm in a condition that it can be discharged, or in a manner that the person should have known that an unsupervised minor would be able to gain access to the firearm, you could be guilty of a crime under this statute. So it's important to remember that there is also a legal obligation that we properly store our firearms. Next slide. So going into storage methods, there's a lot of different ways that you can store your gun, but here are some major ways. The first one, locking cables or chains. You can see that in the bottom picture here. This is going to be the cheapest method of storing your firearm. What you're doing is you're taking either a cable or a chain and you're running it through the ejection port of the slide, down through the magazine, and then locking it together. This is going to render the firearm inoperable because a magazine cannot be inserted and a round cannot be chambered because that cable is running through the gun. However, this is one of the least secure methods of storage because that cable can be cut. And unless you also use that cable to hook it around an immovable object, your firearm could still be stolen and then later unlocked. One plus to this is that it's a pretty quick access to your firearm. If you have a key, you can just turn the key, pull the cable, and your firearm's ready to be operated again. Then we have locking cabinets or hidden compartments. I would try to stay away from hidden compartments just because they're still not locked. It's always preferable to have your firearm in a locked place. So that way it's out of reach of any minors. And then we have safes. This is the best method of storage. However, it's going to be the most costly. There are different types of safes. We have combination locks or biometrics. Biometrics are preferred because it allows you quicker access to the firearm. However, these are going to be the most expensive form of storage. With a safe, they often have a way where you can actually bolt them down to the foundation of the home to kind of keep the safe itself from being taken. So this is going to make the gun as secure as possible, but as I said, it's going to be the most costly method. Next slide. So moving on to police interactions, it's important to remember that if you're having a police interaction where you are in possession of a firearm, that risk is always going to be higher. So it's important that you remain calm and take steps so that everyone feels safe in the situation. If you're in a vehicle, I recommend when you get pulled over, you lower the window and turn on the interior lights. Make sure that your hands are always clearly visible and inform the officer, disclose that you have a weapon. And most likely also inform where the weapon is stored. And then do not reach for the weapon. If the officer will most likely have you exit the vehicle, they will take the firearm and ensure it is out of the way. But if they do not, and you feel uncomfortable, if they ask you to grab for registration and you're uncomfortable, clearly communicate with the officer that you feel uncomfortable and you don't want to reach for anything. And they will handle it from that point on. Just make sure that after you're disclosing that you have a weapon, you're not reaching for anything suddenly. You're not reaching for an area where the officer can no longer see your hands. Because the biggest thing is to avoid any situation where it could be interpreted that you are reaching for a firearm. Next slide. If you have a police interaction on foot, a lot of it is going to remain the same. However, it's most likely that the firearm would be located on a holster on your waistband. So you don't want to be reaching for your identification after you've already informed the officer that you have a firearm and it be interpreted as you reaching for a firearm. So you'll disclose to the officer the same as in a vehicle that you have a firearm on your person. The police officer will disarm you from that firearm, and then you continue with the interaction. So it's just always remember to remain calm, clearly communicate that you have a firearm on your person, tell them where it is located, and do not make any sudden movements or reach for anything where your hands are uncleared. Next slide. And that concludes my portion. So now we'll move on to Jada's portion.
Thank you so much, Nick. I appreciate that. That was really great information. Jada, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Yep, that's good. Thank you all for sticking with us this far. I'm hoping that this information is getting across to you all well. And this is the last few slides that we'll have to present to you all. So again, thank you all for sticking with us. My portion, I'm going to tackle more so just underscoring what Nick has said, but in how specific it is to North Carolina with the laws that we have here. We think it's important to cover this type of information because your laws as it pertains to firearms is going to differ state to state. An example of that is where I'm from in District of Columbia, a lot of our gun laws are much more strict. So it's very difficult to purchase a firearm and carry that legally in DC if you're not a law enforcement officer or a government official. North Carolina is a lot more liberal with their laws. So we're going to cover some of those things that you may encounter if you are interested in purchasing a firearm and how you should carry them so that you're in accordance with the law here. So in North Carolina, there are going to be two main forms of, basically, for lack of better words, permit or how you can carry your firearm. And the first is open carry. So as you see in this picture, this is an example of open carry. Your firearm is visible to anyone that walks past you. It is not concealed in any manner. Your shirt is not over it. Everyone can pretty much tell that you're carrying a firearm. And there's no permit necessary to do so. So at this level, you'll have a permit to actually purchase your firearm, but it's not going to say that I am allowed to open carry in this manner. The second form is your concealed carry. So in this picture, if his shirt was to be over or if the holster was inside the pants to where you can't really visibly see from the outside, that's what we like to call concealed carry. And this is where you actually have a permit. That's called your concealed carry permit. There's a few steps that you'll have to do to be able to get a concealed carry permit. And the first of which is you'll have to sit through a handgun safety course. In my experience, this course has been kind of like an all-day affair, just like a day of class, maybe like a 9 to 5, where they'll cover your laws in North Carolina. They'll do a presentation that's extremely similar to what Nick gave you earlier, how you should store it, how you should carry it, those things that ensure that you are being a responsible gun owner and handler. So after that, you'll send that application into your local sheriff's office and they'll do your background check. You'll pay a fee and they'll kind of just go through and say, hey, is this person responsible enough, safe enough to own a firearm without being a danger to others? So again, these are your two options. So we'll get a little bit more into how that plays out. To the next slide. Okay, so just as I was explaining earlier, these laws are going to differ state by state. So these are 3 apps that I found extremely helpful in pretty much giving you a play-by-play of what you should do with your firearm if you're ever traveling. So a lot of things that I think, or I guess a common myth that I've heard is that, if you're in North Carolina, your permit is in North Carolina, those are the laws that you follow wherever you go. And that is not the case by any means. I know with South Carolina, at least, their gun laws are a bit more strict, and there's certain ways that you have to either travel with your firearm. Maybe you'll have to have it in a locked box in your trunk or in your glove compartment. These are just 3 apps that'll tell you literally what the law is there and what you should do. So if you're ever traveling with your firearm, these are 3 things that I would consult to let you know that you are in accordance with the law wherever you are. So both of these, I believe, are Android and iPhone compatible. So if you all are firearm owners, or if you plan to be in the future, these are 3 that I would definitely take advantage of, especially if you travel a lot and plan to bring your firearm with you. So next slide. Okay. Just to give you all like a background of what it looks like for North Carolina as far as gun owners, just a few stats. That concealed carry permit as of, I want to say the data that I have is current as of May 19th of 2021. So 604,000 some odd people actually have concealed carry permits. And I think I found that a bit shocking, of course, coming from DC where I didn't really see guns, especially if not that they were legal. And just coming here and seeing that people are much more free with how they exercise their Second Amendment rights. So you can go to your local gas station and just see anyone openly or concealed carrying. States that honor North Carolina permits, I think, is one of the more liberal ones. So about 38 states will say, hey, if you have a North Carolina permit, there's no additional paperwork or anything that you have to do if you travel to any of these 38 states that pretty much honor your permit that you have. There are 12 that currently don't. So there's some additional paperwork you may have to do if you do travel to a state that does not honor your permit. And in most cases, there are some exceptions, but the minimum age to actually purchase a firearm and carry it in one of these two manners is 21. There are some exceptions which will go to the type of gun that you have. So for example, with rifles, it may be a lower age that you are able to purchase or own a firearm. But for the most part, I would just look at 21 as being like your baseline. What's the next slide? And like I was mentioning earlier, these are laws that are going to be specific to North Carolina. So we're hoping that this is most helpful to you. But there are certain places that you are not allowed to carry your firearm in North Carolina. And a lot of these is underscoring what Nick said earlier. It's all about safety. So a lot of the places that say that you cannot carry your firearm here are places where it could be an increased risk if that firearm were with you and kind of got into the wrong hands. So you like to think about schools, law enforcement offices, detention facilities. Those are places that people are seeing as a higher risk. Now, as of recently, our 5th bullet or so says that, schools, generally, it used to be that if you're on school campuses, you should not have a firearm. That law has recently changed and said you can have it on those grounds, but it can't be on your person. You can keep it in your vehicle, locked, of course, if you have a permit. So that's one that, it's a little bit of wiggle room. But those 3 apps that are updated constantly, you'll be able to know, okay, it's whatever day that you're looking at your app, that should be your most current law that'll tell you if anything has changed. But this slide, is not exhaustive of the places that you cannot have your firearm. So I put in the chat accidentally earlier, but I can put it in again, but there's a file that says North Carolina firearms laws, and that'll give you the exhaustive list of where you can and cannot have a firearm. But these are the main ones that we want to highlight again, because having a firearm in these situations, in these locations, could be particularly dangerous. One of the ones I do want to highlight specifically, sorry, you go back, is that if you are consuming alcohol or any substances, you should not have your firearm with you. We can't stress that enough. You can have your firearm in a bar, but again, if you're consuming anything from there, it's extremely irresponsible to have your firearm with you because anything can happen. I guess a funny example of this one, I used to work at the Department of Justice, and one of our employees went to a bar, was having a good time, and he had his firearm with him. He felt so compelled. He was under the influence of things, and he did a flip, and his firearm actually fell out of his pants pocket, discharged, and hit someone. So that's an example of things where, this is a real life example of, you're consuming alcohol, you may not be as responsible. These are the things that can happen. Someone actually was hit by that bullet. So we're just trying to make sure that you're as safe as possible. So those are the reasons behind some of these rules. So you can go to the next one. So these are places that you actually are allowed to have your firearm. Again, this is not exhaustive, but if you consult the file that I put in the chat that I'll put again, so this at the bottom, you'll see places that you generally are allowed to carry your firearm. State parks, state and national forests, vehicles. Of course, in some instances, it may have to be locked and out of your immediate reach. School campuses, again, if you have a permit, it has to remain in your vehicle. It can't be carried on your person. Again, these aren't exhaustive, so you can consult the file that's going to be in the chat. Next slide. So earlier when I was mentioning your 2 types of ways in which you can carry your firearm and how North Carolina laws interact with different states' laws, we kind of term that reciprocity. So basically, if I have a permit in North Carolina, those other 38 states that honor that, that's what we're terming reciprocity. So this is just pretty much a graphic of how you can see North Carolina's laws playing with other states. So your blue are those 38 states that say, hey, if you have a permit in North Carolina, you're completely fine. No additional work needs to be done. For your yellow and reds, those are where there's more gray area. So with your red, we're not honoring your North Carolina permit at all. There are additional things you need to do to legally carry your firearm in my state. And generally those few states is because their laws are way more strict. And 2, there are some things that may conflict in terms of what you can and can't do. So an example would be if I have a North Carolina permit and says, hey, I can have my firearm in my vehicle on school grounds. Maybe if you go to California, it may not be that same way. Maybe I can't have my gun at all. So those are some of the things that you want to watch for, especially with those 3 apps that'll lay it out. If you go to California, this is what you should do with your firearm. If you go to DC, this is what you should do. So this is just a graphic to give you all a big picture of how, I guess, generous other states are with North Carolina's laws when it comes to firearms. And that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Jada. That was Great, and I'm so thankful for all the information that both you and Nick and all of your effort in putting this together. I thank you both so much, and I wanted to ask to see if Nicole Little or Sheriff Kimbrough had any comments or anything they would like to add.
Again, you guys did a great job, really spot on when it comes to firearm safety. I was mentioning to Katie that, firearm laws are a super hot topic. They always have been. And with me being, again, practicing and really having like one-on-one encounters with folk that are, encountering law enforcement, but just have a confusion in general when it comes to how and when they can carry. I think that this is a very important topic. There are a couple things I wanted to point out as well. Nick did a great job in kind of, mentioning why making sure you secure your firearms are important because of individuals having access to them that are not supposed to have access to them. I just wanted to kind of point out another reason of that is because, we see possession of stolen firearm charges all the time. What you find is that you can be gifted a firearm from somebody else. A lot of people, even though it may not be the smartest thing to do, may actually buy a firearm off of someone that they know. And you don't know where that firearm originated, how they got it. If they're selling you a firearm, oftentimes it's because it's hot, is what we call it. You don't know if a murder has been committed on that body. I mean, on that gun, I had a case in my short amount of years already, where in fact somebody was sold a firearm by somebody they believed to be a friend, and come to find out that firearm was used in a murder. So with that being said, it's just not smart at all to purchase firearms, through the street way. You could certainly be gifted a firearm, maybe from, your wife or a relative, but you want to make sure that you are handling it properly and that you do the search to make sure that that firearm is not stolen, because that is in fact a Class G felony in North Carolina. So that's one thing. Another big thing is that Jada mentioned carry and conceal laws. It is very important when you take that carry conceal class, the protocol that they advise you of, to actually implement that when you come into contact with law enforcement. One of the biggest things I see is carry conceal handgun permit violations, whether that be you carrying a concealed gun while you have alcohol in your system, which is an automatic violation, of course. But most importantly, I think sometimes it's really a confusion mechanism. You guys talked about disclosing to to law enforcement. You have to disclose upon approach, whether, when you have a firearm concealed in your car, for safety reasons for the officer, number one, but also number two, so that you can protect your license when you have it, your permit. But oftentimes people will start giving them their license and giving them their registration, and then say, oh, by the way, I have a firearm, in the car. Guess what that means? That is a violation. That is a violation. You are putting your permit at risk because you didn't tell them as soon as they got to the vehicle that you had a firearm in your car. You were simply complying with what they asked for. But I will say, when they say disclose, it means disclose immediately. And I feel like that needs to be added to the statute. I feel like that needs to be added, in trainings, is that it needs to be the first thing that comes out of your mouth is, I have a concealed firearm in the vehicle. Now what do you want? And go, from there, because you don't want to lose it's an investment, and you don't want to lose your permit due to a mistake that has been made. So that's the other thing I wanted to point out. Also, with carry and conceal permits, not permits, but carry and conceal charges. If you do in fact have a firearm in the car that is not readily noticeable to anybody that comes upon approach, it's not in an open, visible kind of capacity, such as on the dashboard or in the passenger seat or on the back seat in an open area, if it's tucked underneath your seat, in that side door handle of your car, those are all bases for a carry and conceal gun charge if you do not have a permit. And one thing that I did not know before I started practicing law is that while the first one may just be a Class 2 misdemeanor, and you may think that it's okay, I'll just get this done and then go take a class and actually get my permit. Well, the second one is actually a felony, and so my fear at times, and what I like to advocate for, is how can I prevent my client from being convicted of a felony, because at that point, your right to carry it is taken away from you. You don't have the right to have a firearm at all. And so we could prevent people by educating them and letting them know this is so important, because the second time you're really at risk. Somebody can become a felon simply by making the mistake twice. So it's not worth making the mistake twice. So one, get the education. You guys did a great job in explaining that. Continue to encourage people. add immediately when you talk about being the firearm being disclosed to law enforcement on approach for the safety of the officer, but also so that you can protect your permit when you have it. And when you don't have it, making sure it's very visible, because that is one of the easiest ways to become a felon in North Carolina, is to be charged with carrying a concealed gun twice. And so that was one thing. But also to know if you're not legally permitted to carry a firearm, that it doesn't always have only state consequences, but it can also have federal consequences. Generally speaking, whenever I have a client who's been charged with possession of firearm by felon, the next question becomes, is the United States attorney going to pick up this case? We've had a lot of homicides over the last couple of years or so in Forsyth County. And our law enforcement are doing trying their best to work those cases. But the reality is that we have a lot of guns that are getting into the hands of a lot of people, especially young people. So when we have those rates going up so high, when it comes to prosecuting them, our DA's office and our United States Attorney's office really they hold no bar. Whether or not, whatever my belief on that is one way or another, but the reality is, if you're not legally permitted to carry a firearm at this time for whatever reason, do not jeopardize yourself by, one, getting state charges, but also ending up in the federal criminal justice system, which is the stakes are much higher. So I just wanted to add those things, but great job, guys.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Sheriff Kimbrough.
No, I just want to say, first of all, Nick, I want to thank you for your service. You did an excellent presentation on it. You also have a very expensive taste for weapons. I saw it at Walter when you first started your demonstration at Walter, and then you finish up with that SIG. So I just want you to know that your presentation was spot on, and Nicole, as always. Jada, you did a phenomenal job too with the states that have reciprocity. One of the things that was so poignant again is what Attorney Little said was, know the weapon that you're purchasing, because you could purchase a weapon on the street and it has many bodies attached to it. Each weapon leaves its own footprint, has its own distinct firing. And so I think that you have to be careful, just piggybacking what Nick said, as it relates to storing your weapon, the conditions that you're leaving in, knowing it's secured, because a firearm is not a novelty to say I have one to carry. And, most of us adults, is not a toy. It only has one purpose, that's killing. And hunting, which is killing. But I think that the presentations were great. One of the things that when you were talking about was carrying a firearm concealed in your vehicle. That's a very interesting point. And I always, again, have these conversations in my household with my boys. And I had to have it early on because one of my boys used to love driving my vehicles. And he would always call and say, Dad, can I borrow your car? And I would say yes, not knowing that sometimes I may have left a weapon in my vehicle, not knowing that the weapon is in my vehicle. So if my son is stopped and they say, let me see your license and your registration, he hits the button looking in there for the registration card in the console, and there sits a Glock. There's a problem because the officer's only responding to what he sees, not knowing that, hey, this kid is driving his dad's car. The thing could go bad there. And so that taught me a valuable lesson, is that always educate my kids if they're driving one of my vehicles. This is my dad's car. I don't know what's in it. Let me call him, or you welcome to look in the console. I'm even willing to get out. Because at the end of the day, the officer that stops you, he's not trying to bring you home. He's trying to make it home just like you're trying to get there. And so that interaction is based on a behavior experience exchange. How are we going to do this? And so what you said was spot on. Communications. If you know you have a weapon inside your glove box or your console, you need to let that be known. Let it be known, because the worst thing that an officer wants to do is for you to open your console. He see the weapon and you're reaching in the console. And if you were to flip that and you say, you the officer and I'm the driver, and you stop me on the side of the road and I got my flashlight shining in your vehicle, and you reach in your console, I don't know you, you don't know me, and all I see is your hand going toward the gun. If I were to ask any 2, 4, 6 of you all, what would your reaction be to that? You would go for your weapon pretty much, right? And so a lot of that can be handled totally different by saying, hey, I have a weapon here in this glove box. Here's my hands. How do you want me to handle this, sir? You welcome for me to get out, whatever you want me to do, because that's when things go bad, when we don't communicate on the side of the road. Nothing for nothing. Several years ago, even before we got to this place, would have been about 2013, 2014. There was a guy who wrote a book called Surviving the Stop. Phenomenal book, bestseller. And he talked about the exact same things that you just spoke about, Nick, surviving the stop, STOP. So you guys done a phenomenal job. Nicole, you spot on everything that you said. And I think that this is something that you all are doing. You should take it to the high schools. You should take it to the college campuses. And I tell you why, because there's a plethora of young kids out there, 18 years old, that are purchasing guns. Because at 18, you can actually purchase a gun. You just can't get a permit to carry concealed. So I could actually get a purchase permit for a weapon at 18. I just can't buy it from a dealer, but I can buy it from a private seller that they have across North Carolina. So now I'm an 18-year-old kid with a gun, right? A kid, because, you know, it takes a while for you to hit that maturity mindset. But my thought is that when I was listening to you all talk, you're so articulate, and the message that you have will save lives. It will change lives. And if it's some kind of way, while you have this platform right now, it's something that I think that you should open it up. Just my thoughts on for you all. You should open it up to a bigger audience, such as the high schools, because you all could literally save lives with this information. You literally could do that. And if you need some help getting it out there to a platform such as the schools, I'll be glad to connect you with Trish McManus, the new superintendent, because what you're doing will actually save lives and change lives. But you're doing a phenomenal job, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of the conversation.
Thank you so much, Sheriff Kimbrough, for your advice and for your comments. We appreciate it to no end, and we're so thankful to have you here today. And Nicole as well to give a little bit of insight into some of the things that we discussed. And thank you again to Nick and Jada for that wonderful presentation. So now as we're closing out, I want to open up the floor to anybody who has any questions. If you want to put them in the chat, we are happy to, we have Nicole as well as Sheriff Kimbrough here to answer any questions you may have. And any closing remarks from any of our presenters or Sheriff Kimbrough or Nicole are absolutely welcome.
I mean, my closing remark would be simply what I was saying earlier, is that I think that what's happening, I won't even go what's happening around the country, but just what's happening right here with the uptick in gun violence. Knowledge is powerful. Knowledge is powerful. A lot of people die and perish and suffer for a lack of knowledge. A lot of people in prisons for a lack of knowledge. We have a lot of men across the street that are there because of a lack of knowledge. And what I'm saying is that the knowledge that you have, I think that you should take it beyond this platform that you have. You need to take it to the masses, because there's a population of men and women out there that have no idea of what to carry a gun is. Like, so for example, I was going to give you some statistics, some numbers. So right now, we average about a couple hundred people a week carrying weapons in this county, just coming down here through the doors. Thought I had it written down somewhere here. Here we go. So right now, on a daily basis, we have about 60 people come through here every day applying for guns. 5 days a week, right? That's about 300 people averaging coming through here. Since December, there have been 5,997 permits issued, right? That's just since December. 5,000 people have come down here. No, excuse me. 6,300, excuse me, 3 people short of 6,000. 6,000 people have come through these doors since January 1 to get purchase permits. We're talking about a county that has right at 400,000 people. And I'm just telling you, since January, right now, just looking at what we have, what we're able to track. Now, there's something that we can't track because people have guns, don't even register them. Just what we can track. You're talking about roughly 50,000 people carrying guns, right? 50,000 right here in this county, 50,000. And you're talking about a county that's right at 400,000 people. In other words, there's a lot of people out here carrying weapons. There's a lot of people out here carrying something that will change your life, in your life. And so what I will close by saying is that I really hope that you all consider, I know you're in your last year of law school, but if you have the time to take this platform beyond this space right here, it's a must, because there's so many things that are happening that will change law enforcement, that will help law enforcement, that will change lives. You know, I'll tell you this and then I'm gone. During 9/11, I was an agent with the federal government, and they took us back to Quantico. Nick, you're a Marine, so you know where Quantico is. Half of the Quantico is Marine side, half of it's FBI side. And they was explaining to us after the 9/11 that they were going to put agents on the planes to secure the planes. And they started explaining the atmosphere, the mesosphere, the stratosphere, the exosphere. They talked about at every level of the atmosphere, there's something that takes place. But one thing that they said to us that was powerful to me, and I've never forgotten, is that at any level of the atmosphere, right here in your space, if you enter that atmosphere, you have the ability to change it. In other words, I can set this room up for many different things. It's the same room. I just changed the ambiance. I just changed the atmosphere. And when you start changing atmospheres, you start changing lives. And so what I'm saying is, if you all enter the atmosphere of this gun violence, you can change the atmosphere, you can change the outcome, and you can change lives. Thank you very much. May God bless you all. I love you, Nicole, and thank you all for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Nicole, did you want to say anything?
Yes, love you too, Sheriff Kimbrough. Again, I just will reiterate what Sheriff Kimbrough has already stated. Nick, Jada, Cedric, Katie, you guys did a great job in pulling this together. It was a lot of important information that I think a lot of people needed to hear. And I agree with Sheriff Kimbrough to the extent that you guys can possibly create some type of platform and maybe push this out further. Maybe if COVID relaxes a little bit next year during you guys' semester, maybe get into the community and have this discussion. It's important stuff. Generally speaking, there's one thing that was told to me and that I tend to try to take in, my life is don't fight the battle on the side of the road, fight the battle in the courtroom. We are all licensed. Well, I'm a licensed attorney. You guys are on your way to becoming licensed attorneys, whether you're doing criminal defense, corporate, whatever it may be. You will learn that fighting right there on the side of the road doesn't help anybody. Oftentimes what you will find is that you are not as equipped as you think that you are. And so what Cedric highlighted today, being kind of like the basic rights that you just need to understand, will allow your attorney to be able to advocate for you the best way that you know how. We are encountering humans at the end of the day. When the police encounter you, you are in fact human. When you encounter the police, they are in fact human as well. And we all take our own experiences into these interactions. But the reality is, you need to be able to leave from that encounter whole and be able to walk into an attorney's office and say, this is what I have. You don't want the misunderstanding of you reaching for what is perceived to be a firearm when you thought you were just reaching for your registration to land you in a bad predicament. I think that the basic way that we can begin to kind of improving police interactions with the community is, one, realizing that everybody is human. And that's why I tend to shout out Sheriff Kimbrough a lot, because of those policies that he has. They are to effectuate the culture to say that we are serving the community, and whether or not that matriculates through his entire department. I have come in contact with law enforcement officers who are following that policy. We're not going to tongue lash you. We're not going to sit out here and call you a crackhead, or we're not going to sit out here and call you nothing but a drug user. Those are not things that I hear often coming from Forsyth County Sheriff's Department, but it's because of some of the policies that Sheriff Kimbrough has implemented. And I appreciate that from him, because I at least feel like my clients didn't leave from those interactions feeling less than decent, less than human. And so that's the basic Quantico. But I also think that what you guys talked about today also helps with prevention. And that's why it's important for people to know. There are so many situations, and this is like the least favorite part of my job. Oftentimes I feel like I come in after the crisis. When I get into the case, somebody coming to me in an emergency situation, this is what happened, and I don't think this was right, and I get to write my notes down. And then when I get the reports and I get the video, the axon from officers, I'll see, oh, this is where the encounter turned left. Whether it be on the officer's end, because I'll perceive that he may have misunderstood something from my client, or my clients and they misunderstood something, or they misinterpreted the law and they were trying to assert something that was not factual. Those are generally the basic ways that my encounters, my view of what is occurring in these cases could have been prevented. And so while this is my livelihood, I would like to have less clients over time. So, you know, you great legal minds can take the work that you're doing, educate more people about it, certainly continue to connect with the community, such as with people like me, Sheriff Kimbrough, with Frankie. That could help. That could help on a larger scale. So thank you guys so much. I think in terms of any high points for me, I hit them throughout the presentation, but I really do appreciate the opportunity to come and to speak with you all. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much again, Nicole. And Frankie, did you want to say anything? I also wanted to let everybody know before, Frankie, if you say anything, that this will be recorded and that we will be able to share it on multiple platforms. I believe that Ethan had shared in the chat that it will be on Hope Dealers Outreach Facebook and their YouTube, and we will be sharing it on the Society for Criminal Justice Reform's pages as well for people to access. So with that, Frankie, did you want to say anything to close us out?
Yes, I will say thank you to everyone, especially to Sheriff Bobby Kimbrough and my sister Attorney Nicole Little. These conversations is definitely needed. As I was sitting here, I was just writing down the vision for this movement, because this is a movement that we can't stop just here on Zoom. When we planned this originally, COVID was still running rapid in the world, and so we really could have took this to another platform besides Zoom, but at that time, Zoom was the only location. But as we were going through all of the slides, I was just writing down locations of where we can go. You know, like Sheriff Kimbrough said, we can really save a lot of lives. I know about 10 to 15 young guys right now for a fact that needs to hear this. Maybe because they're not here today because they don't have Zoom or don't know how to work it. That's neither here or there. But we got to meet them where they are. And so we would take it to where they are. And, you know, I was writing down schools. I can name a couple schools right now. I text one of the guidance counselors while we were here, and she said, hey, set it up. Let's do it. You know, there's some, even with this summer camps, you know, go to the YMCA, go to the recreation centers, connect with other platforms that will be having summer camp for kids. You know, even when school go back, we can do even with just families where a lot of children in the home that needs to be educated on this. Can't stop here. And I thank you all for making this happen. And like I always say, it takes a village. And so today the village has stood up, and so the village must continue to stand up. And I thank you. And like I always say, love is in love until you give it away.
Thank you so much, Frankie, and thank you to everybody today for attending, and for all of our presenters. Thank you so much again. I'm very happy that we were able to make this happen, and looks like we might have some opportunities to make this happen again in the future. And like I said, it will be recorded and sent out, but just as a personal thank you all, I appreciate all of you so much for being here and for helping make this event happen. With that, I think that is all that we have, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye, everyone.